Today is Friday, July 10th, 2026, and today is Don't Step on a Bee Day, which sounds less like a holiday and more like solid life advice. But after digging through today's stories, I noticed they all had something in common. Every one of them challenged the way people thought the world was supposed to work. A legendary noblewoman stood up to authority. A courtroom became the center of a national debate about science and education. And a simple computer server quietly opened the door to the modern internet. None of those moments changed everything overnight, but each one asked a question that people couldn't ignore. Sometimes that's all it takes to change history. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who keeps finding historical stories that sound completely fake until you realize they actually happened. On July 10th, 1040, according to tradition, Lady Godiva made her famous ride through the streets of Coventry. Now, before we go any further, it's worth mentioning that historians have debated this story for centuries. Did it happen exactly as the legend tells it? Maybe. Maybe not. But the story has endured for nearly 1,000 years, and that alone makes it worth telling. According to the legend, Lady Godiva's husband, Leofric, was the Earl of Mercia. He had imposed heavy taxes on the people of Coventry. Godiva repeatedly pleaded with him to lower them. Finally, perhaps believing she'd never agree, he supposedly told her he would reduce the taxes if she rode naked through the town. To his surprise, she accepted. The legend says the townspeople were instructed to remain indoors out of respect while she made the ride. Only one man couldn't resist looking. You probably know him better as Peeping Tom. Whether that character was part of the original legend is doubtful. It seems to have appeared centuries later, but his name became permanently attached to the story. What's always fascinating to me isn't whether every detail is historically accurate. It's why people kept telling the story. For generations, Lady Godiva became a symbol of someone willing to sacrifice personal comfort to stand up for ordinary people. Sometimes legends survive not because every detail is true, but because the message still resonates. Of course, challenging authority doesn't always happen on horseback. Sometimes it happens in a courtroom. On July 10, 1925, the Scopes trial began in Dayton, Tennessee. Officially, the case was about a high school teacher named John Scopes, who had been accused of violating Tennessee law by teaching evolution. Unofficially, it became something much bigger. The trial quickly attracted national and even international attention. Newspapers from around the world sent reporters. For many Americans, it was one of the first courtroom dramas they followed almost like a sporting event. Two of the most famous lawyers of the era faced off. William Jennings Bryan argued for the prosecution. Clarence Darrow defended Scopes. Their legal arguments soon expanded into broader questions. How should science be taught? What role should religion play in public education? Who decides what students are allowed to learn? Those questions reached far beyond one Tennessee courtroom. John Scopes was ultimately found guilty and fined $100. But the trial's influence didn't end with the verdict. It became one of the defining moments in America's ongoing conversation about science, education, and public debate. I've always found it interesting that the Scopes trial is remembered less for its legal outcome and more for the questions it forced an entire nation to confront. And our final story reminds us that some revolutions don't begin with speeches, or protests, or courtroom arguments. Sometimes they begin with a computer sitting quietly in a laboratory. On July 10, 1992, the first permanent World Wide Web server became publicly available. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine life without the web. We use it to work, learn, shop, watch movies, read the news, listen to podcasts like this one every day, and apparently ask artificial intelligence to help write history podcasts. But in 1992, the World Wide Web looked almost unbelievably simple. No streaming video, no social media. Thank goodness. No online shopping, no endless scrolling, just plain text connected by clickable links. The idea had been developed by British computer scientist Tim Berners-Lee, who believed information shouldn't be trapped inside isolated computer systems. Instead, documents should be connected. Anyone, anywhere should be able to follow those connections and share knowledge. It was a simple idea, one that quietly reshaped the modern world. What's fascinating is that almost nobody outside the computing community realized they were witnessing the beginning of a revolution. There were no crowds, no countdown, no front-page headlines announcing that everything was about to change. Just a server waiting for someone to connect. Sometimes history doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it simply waits for people to discover it. And while looking back across today's stories, they all began with someone willing to change accepted ideas. A legendary noblewoman challenged unfair authority. A courtroom challenged the boundaries between science, education, and public opinion. A computer scientist challenged the way information moved around the world. And that brings us to someone who spent his entire life imagining possibilities other people couldn't yet see. Born on July 10th, 1856, Nikola Tesla was the kind of inventor who often sounded like he was describing science fiction. Long before wireless communication became ordinary, Tesla imagined sending information through the air. Long before remote controls became common, he demonstrated a radio-controlled boat that left audiences wondering if it was magic. His work with alternating current helped make it possible to transmit electricity efficiently over long distances. That one achievement alone transformed the modern electrical grid. But Tesla rarely seemed interested in stopping with what was practical. He envisioned wireless power, global communication, machines that could be controlled from miles away. Some of those ideas worked. Some never left the drawing board. Others simply had to wait for technology to catch up. And one thing I've always admired about Tesla is that he wasn't afraid of sounding impossible. History is full of inventors who improved what already existed. Tesla often tried to imagine what didn't exist yet. And looking back across today's stories, I kept thinking about the courage it takes to question accepted ideas. Whether every detail of Lady Godiva's ride happened exactly as the legend tells it almost doesn't matter. The story has inspired people for nearly 1,000 years. The Scopes trial reminded us that difficult questions don't disappear simply because they're uncomfortable. The World Wide Web began as a quiet experiment before becoming one of the most influential inventions in human history. And Nikola Tesla spent his life proving that today's impossible idea can become tomorrow's ordinary reality. Anyway, that's what today's journey through July 10th kept bringing me back to. I'll leave you with a thought from Nikola Tesla himself. The present is theirs. The future, for which I really worked, is mine. If you'd like to hear more of my narration work, podcasts, or other projects, you can find everything at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and thanks for taking a weird little walk through history with me. I'll see you tomorrow.